I don't know if I got some.
Well, and we want to ask kind of together. We want some of you, so get the
thing?
yes, yes.
What
So
is
a question
yeah, I know. I mean, what's it?
about each other.
Oh, wow.
I like to go get my tripod, but that's
Don't
okay.
get it. You get both of them. Don't get
Are
me.
you ready?
I guess.
Ready or not?
As ready as you're gonna be, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we wanted to ask you, and we'll start with you, Dawn, what you remember about meeting Madelyn and what impressed you about her that attracted you to her.
Well, I have to say, when I first met her, I wasn't immediately attracted, but I certainly didn't pass it over. I just, she was somebody new, and I figured that, as time went on, I'd maybe get a chance to meet her, and maybe, who knows, I don't know how much I thought about that right at the first, because we met in choir, and we didn't start dating right away, which would have been different. So I guess, I remember she used to come in and for choir in the choir practice room, and she'd set, I think it was stuff she put on the floor. I don't remember what. Seemed like it, because I remember she was always squatting down, and she'd get up and go, hurry right down to the choir loft. So I didn't really get an impression of any kind until a certain group from the choir, about anywhere from 6 to about a dozen, that after choir we used to go to one of the restaurants and have a piece of pie, or a lot of them that had coffee, or some of them got a fried egg or stuff like that. So she went. This is the first time she went, and as I looked at her, why, she actually looked different. Where would you say? She sat at one end of the table, and I sat on the corner of the opposite end. Okay, so I could see her from that distance. And I looked at her, and I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to have to date her. And but I didn't get the impression until we were all finished eating, and I don't know, we just going down the aisle to the cashier's desk, which was kind of a long ways, 30 feet, something like that. And we ended up being right next to each other. It just, like everybody got up and ready to pay and leave. And that's when I really got first time to really look at her face. And she looked up at me, and I don't remember exactly what we said, but I thought, no, this little rascal is cute. She has such a pretty little smile, which I liked, and she just sort of all of a sudden made a big impression on me. And so the church in San Bernardino was having a Christmas party, and I needed a date. And I really didn't have someone that I was dating. And so I thought, then we went, I don't know just what all we said, but we talked a little. We went down the aisle and got to the cashier. And so I thought, boy, I gotta see if she dates, you know. So I thought real quick, oh yeah, Bill Black, one of the guys in choir, he kept records of everybody's home phone address, all that stuff, and filed the music. So right away my brain said, call him, maybe he's got her number. And he did. So I called her and asked her if she would like to go, and she said yes, she would go. And I thought, oh, this is great. And so I asked her, I said, this is an affair. You wear heels and hose.
No,
You
he
know,
said long gown.
And so I said, does she have that?
Long gown.
Long gown, yeah. Floor length, yeah. And she said, yes, I do. I just come back from Taiwan, and, you know, and I had some clothes even made there. Oh, I said, this is great. So anyhow, she said she'd go. And, you know, I'm not all that good a talker, and had a kind of a tough time with talking to her because it's a long ways from Anaheim to
Oh.
up there. Yeah, but she went, and I'll let her give you the other part. This is your questions is pretty good because this has another angle
Yeah.
to it, which she'll tell you.
You want to tell us?
Well, let's see. He called on the phone, and I wasn't there, but my daughter answered. And he said he wanted to ask me to go something, and she said, well, she's not home right now. So he said, well, you tell her to call ASAP. I didn't even know what it meant. I asked Stephanie, and she says he said it as soon as possible. So I said, fine. So then the first thing he asked me, he says, do you have a formal dress, long? I said, yes. I said, I haven't got to wear them all. And I said, I would enjoy wearing one. And so the get-together was in Airhead Springs. And it was a really lovely, lovely dinner and everything. Did you go?
Yeah.
No. Okay, no, I met Linda. Did she go? Linda didn't go.
Oh,
Anyway, so I didn't know him hardly.
no.
All the way
No,
up
she
there,
didn't.
he talked about Judy, and now she was in the dark spirits and the spirit world. And I thought, why would he talk about that on a first date? You know, I mean, the whole trip.
Oh,
And
well,
so I asked him later why. He says, well, I couldn't think of anything else to say, you know? And so we went, and it was lovely. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and he was enjoyable. And then when we decided to leave, Richard and Norma said, well, let's stop at Farrell's. on the way back and have ice cream. So we did. And
In Riverside.
in Riverside, yeah, it was
So
amazing.
he did go quite a ways out of his way
Yeah.
to get
yeah.
to where they live.
And so afterwards, Richard told Don, he said, no, Norma told that Richard said, that's the girl he'll marry. She said, this is their first date. He said, yeah, but I know my brother. I thought that was funny, But anyway, so we dated a whole month, going out to dinner, and he took me to I loved all the food. And he was pleasant to be with, but I loved his build. He had the sexiest looking body. He really did, it just took my breath away. And it did. Remember I told you later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we would go together at least a whole month. And he didn't try to kiss me goodnight or anything every time. And every time I'd come in, my daughter would say, did he kiss you goodnight? I said, no. She said, really? I said, no, he didn't even act like he wanted to. So then one of the times we went after choir to have all the get-together, we went out, and I had a ride, but the lady had somewhere else to go, so he said he'd take me home. So we were sitting out in the parking lot near Jolly Rogers, and all of a sudden he reached over and kissed me. And I almost fainted. I'd been kissed a lot in my life, but I had never been kissed like that. It was just awesome. I was just stunned. So when I got home, my daughter said, well, did he kiss you? I said, yes. She said, really? She said, how was he? I said, he kissed better than anybody I've ever seen in my life. She said, really? He seemed so shy. I said, well, he was, but it was so sweet and tender, and it was just so neat. And
Yeah, sure was.
yeah, it was. So we started dating. We dated almost a whole year, and decided to get married. But then we broke up 2 weeks before the wedding.
What's that?
We broke up 2 weeks before the wedding.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a big wedding with invitations. I had the gown, everything, and he had a tuxedo, and I thought, he's so Pentecostal. I don't know if I could cope with that. I knew it, but he never changed at all. I thought maybe he would change a little, but he didn't. And so when Catherine Kuhlman came to Maryland, we were in the choir, and we discussed her lately, and afterwards, and I told him, I said, I don't believe all the things church. I said, to me, I said, God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are first. Family is second, and I said, church is third. And I said, even our minister said that, Don. And he said, well, he wasn't raised that way. Their life was church. So I thought, I can't go into another marriage and it not work out. I thought, I can't do it. So after 2 weeks, we kind of saw each other again, and we just kind of mellowed together. So then we ended up having the big wedding, and he was so precious because he planned for our honeymoon 2 weeks in Hawaii. And our honeymoon was like a dream. He made it that way. And I can truthfully say for the whole year we dated, he really was it was like an old-fashioned courtship. He put himself out. We enjoyed each other. He was kind, but we still had this church thing. And so we got married, and that night we went to the motel, and the next morning he said, well, we have to go to church today. I said, we just got married last night. He said, oh, we can't miss church. So I said, well, I'm not going back to the church where we just were married. And I said, that's embarrassing. So he said, well, you pick a church. So I said, fine. So I picked a church where I knew the people. And that's about it. Just and then, of course, he lived in the house where Nadine and he lived, which I really didn't want to move there. And he said, well, only stay a few months. And he said, we'll get in the house. Well, we stayed there 15 years. Mm-hmm. And finally, I said, okay, I am going to live where I want to live. And I said, you're retiring. If we don't do it now, we will never do it. So I talked him into coming out and look at the property. And I said, I want horses. I said, that's what I want. And so he just fell in love with the property. And so it went on from there. We've lived here 30 years now.
Wow.
What's the next question?
Okay, the next question I'm going to ask Dawn first.
Good.
And I want to ask you, Dawn, what are the virtues, good characteristics that you admire in Madelyn all these years, or even at present day, or in the beginning? What are those different things that you admire in her, or you think that are good traits that she has?
Just traits?
Yeah, traits, anything.
Well,
that you think is good about who she is.
Okay.
Well, I liked a lot of things about her. She was lots of fun, and she was steady, you know, in her thinking, and she was kind. And she could come up with quick ideas, you know, that were interesting, and she's very dependable. She just had a lot of things that. You know, the type of person I was would go for. You know, some guys, the initial relationship wears off awful quick. Some it's only a matter of weeks or months, and other people it's a long, long time. And her personality just grew on me, and we just really enjoyed each other for the most part. We enjoyed each other, period. For the most part, she was right. I was so. I dated very little, and at that time, because I had already, you know, been divorced from my first wife, and so she meant so much to me.
Exactly the same question.
Ask me again.
What are some of the traits, characteristics, virtues in Dawn that you've admired or you appreciate?
I think I admire he never flirted with other women. He never, you date in groups sometimes and different couples. And some of them, they may be are married, but they really have that flirty thing, you know, the men do. And he never did, you know, and I thought, gee, would have changed, you know. And he was never nasty, or he wasn't abusive ever. And he really was gentle. He had a gentle spirit, and that was a big change for me, you know. I mean, and he was exciting. He didn't think he was, but he was, because I always went for guys who was very quiet, laid back, and you know, that was solid. I figured that you could depend on it no matter what happened. And it's not always easy to find somebody like that. And he was exciting to live with. He really was, you know. He still is when he forgets himself and just lets loose, you know. And he was to me, he was so attractive and
Sexy, as you
yeah,
said.
yeah. He was so masculine, you know. And my ex-husband was totally different, you know, and so it was an exciting time to date. It was exciting honeymoon, and he never stopped being what he was, because I thought, if he does, I'm not staying married if he changes, because so many people do. I said, I'm giving it 3 months. And I said, if I decide to leave, I'm not saying one word. I'm just leaving while he's at work. I said, because people spend their whole life with somebody that they can't trust, that, I mean, you know, they're not going to do behind your back. And you know that you don't, you can be in a crowd and you can trust them with other women. And that is a big plus. And that's one of the many things I really liked about him, still do. Another thing always reminds me when I burn toast.
Behind?
When I burn the toast in the toaster, what was it your mother always said?
Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the mom's sayings was, recipe for toast. Put it in the toaster and until it gets brown, and take it to the sink and scrape the color desired.
That's so funny. Okay, well, my name is Madelyn Ruth Messenger. And I was born April the 8th, 1930, in Houston, Texas. And they really, when I was born, they told my father that he could choose between the baby living and his wife, because the cord, they couldn't say both. So I really think how Lord undertook, it was a miracle, you know. And of course my father said, you know, he wanted to save his wife, which he should. I mean, you know, so I'm glad that the Lord had mercy. But anyway, I think as I was growing up, I enjoyed being in things, and I always enjoyed dancing. I started when I was 4, and from then on until I was, in my middle 20s, and then I started teaching. And I taught ballet, tap, jazz, acrobat, everything. And I loved what I did. I didn't make much money, but I loved what I did, you know. And then, I guess that's just about it.
What were your parents' names, and did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, okay. My mother's name was a very different name, and we always wondered where my grandmother got the middle name. Her name, my mother's name was Elmon Tiberius, and her last name was Parker.
Wow.
And then one day I was reading the Bible, and the name in there was Tiberius. I don't think my grandmother got it there, but I thought it was a very odd name. And then my real father's name was Victor Cortland Cox, and he left my mother and me when I was 9 months old. And that was about it. That I saw him maybe 3 times in my life, and only because my mother insisted that she wanted him me to know him. And it was not one of the warm spots in my life, you know. And but he was when he was 5 years old, he lost almost all of his hearing. So I think it affected a lot of problems in his life, you know. And let's see, my grandmother, his name was Ruby Pearl Price, and she was a woman before her time. She was an enterprise person. She had all these businesses she started and made money. I don't mean she was rich, but everything she went into, she just knew she could do, and that's what she did. And I've always admired her for it, you know. And then we didn't have much money when I was growing up, and I loved to take dance lessons, so she always paid for them, which I'm very grateful to her. But one thing I'm sad about is that she played the steel guitar beautifully, and she wanted to teach me, but in those days guitar wasn't popular, so I didn't learn. All my life I've been sorry, you know, but you do crazy things like that when you're young. Okay, I had one brother. My brother was a very different personality. He did not like to be close. I mean, we never had really what you'd say a closeness, and I never could understand it, you know. But that's just how some people are, you know. And I always figured it would be so nice to have had a brother that, you know, that you could talk to and lean on, and figured that you could go to him and talk to if you had a problem. And when I was, am I going on too long? Okay. When I was 3 years old, my mother remarried, and he was head of a grocery store, a big one in Houston, and he was well known, but no one knew how much he drank. He held it very good. Well, after he got married, my mother got married, it just got worse. So they fired him, and we just never had much money. My mother went to work in the department store where she used to be the manager's wife. So I admired her for doing that. And she would hire someone to take care of, and she made $13 a week, and had to pay the lady $5, you know. And my stepfather, he didn't believe in really doing anything except drinking. And he used to say, as long as I've had a bottle, that's all I want. And he would say to my mother, if you'd give the kids away, I could be happy. So I grew up, and my mother was a wonderful mother. She was very possessive, but she was giving. She always made me feel important. She really put herself out, and I'm very grateful for that, you know, because she was stabilizing in my life where I had no other, you know. And then when I was about 14 years old, she'd had enough of him running around with everybody. And so she got a divorce. And in that 2 years we lived out in California during World War II. So then my mother said, well, she wanted to move back to Houston, Texas. So she and I and my brother moved back. And it was really, I loved California and I loved Texas. But I think there's a saying that is so true. You can take a girl out of Texas, but you cannot take Texas out of a girl. Because I still think of myself as being a Texan. And I've been out in California since I was 20. But whatever it is, Texas was different. It was, people love land. People were friendly and warm. And families were close, most of them. But I think I was very blessed in my life. And I still think I'm blessed. And I'm very grateful to God for who I am and for giving me the miracles that I've had.
When you said you came out to Texas with your mother for a couple of years, how old were you when you came, and then when you went back?
Okay, when I came out, I was about 12 and a half, and it was kind of comical because I went into the 6th grade, and out here you had to get up and read out of the reader, so I was used to Southern pronunciation, so 2 of the words in what I had to read was wash and and yellow. And all the kids started laughing, and I was so embarrassed. So I asked the teacher, I said, what were they laughing about? She said, it's not yellow, it's yellow. She said, and it's not wash, it's wash.
Lord.
I said, well, where I'm from, everybody talks that way. And they did. I think the thing I miss about Texas the most is that people were warm. They're probably not now because but in those days they were. But I love living in California the 2 years during World War II. We moved out here and you could not find a place to live. I mean, it was just jammed with the world, And so we lived in this little motel court thing. And it was strange because we lived in Venice, and the court went downhill into the sand, and the buildings were on the sand, and it was only a block from the ocean. Well, the night we got there from Texas, they had one of the largest storms they'd ever had, and you could hear the waves breaking. I thought we were going to get drowned in this place. But we lived there about, 6 months. Found a little bitty base in Ocean Park, which was nice. And we finally found a nice place to rent in Santa Monica. And Santa Monica was a very rich town, and it still is, But there was so much fun there. They had the penny arcade out on the pier. In Ocean Park, they had the penny arcade. And I got 25 cents a week for working at home. And I mean, it was like everything was a penny or a nickel, and it was just a wonderful time in my life. My favorite thing has been filmed in the movies over and over was the famous merry-go-round that was on the Santa Monica Pier. And I used to go there every Saturday with my mother, and if you got the golden ring, you got a free ride. Well, I mean, riding on those horses was my life. And one time I got the ring, and it was so exciting, But that's about my life.
Were you was your mother with your stepfather when you came to California for those 2 years?
Yes. He wouldn't work at all. Well, his friend that he grew up with worked at Douglas, and he talked him into coming out and applying for a menial job. It wasn't any college thing. And so he hadn't been working. He wanted to come to California and see what it was like. So we came, and right away he started dating all the girls and this went on for 2 years. They would come by the house and ask for him. Finally, after 2 years, my mother got tired of it, and that's when we went back to Texas.
Now you said you came back to California when you were 20 years old.
Yes.
And where did you live why and where did you go when you were 20 years old?
Well, I had been married, about maybe 2 years in Houston to my first husband. And he wasn't dependable. I mean, if he'd have just gone on for 6 more months, he'd have got his CPA. But he wouldn't follow anything through. He quit college. He never had to open a book. He was so bright. I mean, really. And, but he was bored with everything. I mean, he just could not cope with life, which I didn't realize that when I met him. But I thought he'd be like his father because I had known his father since I was almost born. And he was a policeman, stable, and I thought, well, his son probably is too, which was stupid. Anyway, so he was out of work and he got this idea he'd like to move to California. Well, we had no money, and we had this little bitty wooden trailer with sides. The only thing we had on it was my cedar chest that his grandmother had given me and our clothes. Shows how stupid people are. So we started out to California, and we got way out in the middle of nowhere, and the tires blew. So we were in the middle of nowhere. It was dark. He says, well, I'm going to have to walk to the nearest town. I thought, oh, so I stayed there, and it was kind of spooky, but God watched over us, which I was so grateful. So when we got out to California, my mother was wonderful, except she didn't like her routine or her life. Once I got married, I mean, she was different when I was growing up, but she didn't really like anything changed. So she said we could stay 2 weeks and had to find something. And so we found this place called the Jenny Wren Motel, and it was in West Los Angeles. And we were only going to stay there temporarily. And we were there a year in one room, and it had just a hot plate. And I mean, it wasn't the fun thing I ever went through. And the car we had was repossessed as soon as we came here because he couldn't pay for it. But he had wrecked half of it already. He'd had it 3 days and ran into a big ditch. So by the time we got out here, they repossessed the car. And we stayed there about a year. And I said, I can't live here anymore. So I said, I am finding another place. So I told my mother, I said, would you take me in your car and look? So I finally found this real nice apartment, and we moved. And my oldest daughter started having breathing problems. So I had to run this, what do they call it? The thing for just to breathe all night.
Oh,
and so
yeah,
finally,
humidifier.
Huh?
Humidifier.
No.
Humidifier.
No, they called it something different in those days. Anyway.
That's what it was.
So it was in Lakewood. Well, the dampness was terrible. So then we decided we found this little place in Inglewood in a court. And we lived there 3 years. And finally I thought, I have had it. So my mother in the meantime, they had never bought a house like that. So my stepfather had a VA loan, so they got a house, and I thought, well, I'll move to Buena Park. So I found this little place next door to the electric things, you know, where all the wires are, but it was reasonable. So I lived there 6 years, and the reason I enjoyed it so much is, first of all, I had a real good job teaching dancing. The second was the church. It was the best. I mean, it was the most fun choir. We put on musicals all the time, like the Mikado and all this kind of stuff. I've never been in a choir that was that much fun. I mean, it was really fun. And so then I got tired of my ex-husband running around, and I thought, this is it. I can't do this. So he became so violent that I knew what was, you know, and so I knew it was either that or I wasn't going to live, because that's how violent he got. So when he was gone one day, I packed up and left and got an apartment and I couldn't keep dancing because I didn't make enough money. So I had to go to work at the City of Anaheim head of collections, which I hated every day of the 3.5 years. I was just moving around and stuff, and to sit there in that chair was just terrible. And so my life just evolved from that, and that's about it.
Can you, and sometimes they're not the favorite things, but can you give just a brief summary about your children, and then what other marriage before Dawn, just whatever you want to say or not say.
My first husband, I didn't realize he had a mental problem. I knew he had problems, but he became so violent that I was afraid for me and the kids. And so when I left, he would sit outside where I worked, which is a big window, with knives and guns on the front seat. I went to the police department and I said, can't you do something about it? They said, not until he harms you. We can't do anything. So anyway, one day he called while I was at work and he said, if you don't meet me at the restaurant down the corner, he said, you're going to be sorry. So I thought, well, okay, it's a public place. So I went down there and he said, he said, every time I walk down the street, I think I may have killed somebody. So I said, you sit right here and don't you move. So I went and called our family doctor who knew him, and he gave me a name of the psychiatrist. So I told him, I said, you're going there right now. I'm putting in a taxi. And I said, if you don't, I'm going to have you arrested. And that scared him because he didn't want to be arrested. Anyway, so the next I heard was the next day, and they came by work and said, you have to go to the mental ward at Orange County Hospital. Your husband tried to kill the nurse. It took 3 men to pull him off for her. He tried to choke her. And so the ironic part was, my brother at that time was was dating this really neat nurse. Well, when I walked in the lock ward, she was head of everything, which was just a miracle to me. So she said, would you like to look at him? I said, not really, but I guess I have to sign papers. I will. So I went in and they had him in a straitjacket because they couldn't control him. So anyway, they had a trial come up, and I didn't realize in Orange County Hospital, they have their own courtroom. It's in there. So they had 3 psychiatrists come in and examine him. Well, the worst part was when they brought him into court, I had to be there and testify against him. And I knew, well, all 3 of them said that he was the most severe case of paranoid and schizophrenic they had ever come across. But I didn't realize that my older daughter was going to have any problems. So anyway, my ex-husband, they transported to the Metropolitan Medical Psychiatric Ward. And they didn't want to keep him because he was a life patient. They couldn't let him out on the street. So they tried to prove that when he was in the Navy that he incurred that. And so they shipped him to the VA, and they proved that he didn't, that he already had problems. So they would not accept him back to the Metropolitan Hospital once you are discharged. So they let him out of the VA hospital, and all the last time he was roaming the streets, and I never knew when the phone rang. He called me every night at 2 o'clock and said he was going to kill me. Every single night, and I was trying to work. I'm not being melodramatic, but that's why he is such a joy. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that was that.
called
So
her
anyway,
other-
so my my older daughter, I knew at the time she was little, she was incorrigible. I mean, you just could not reach her. The family tried to reach her, the pastors, nothing. So, but she always had to go to church, Sunday school, and I read the Bible every night to him, and Bible stories, all that stuff that you do. And I thought, she's really listening. Well, as she got to be a teenager, it was just nightmare. So she told me one day, she said, since I was 5 years old, she said, I've heard the spirits talking to me. I said, really? Which is not surprise me. It didn't surprise me at all. So she said, I didn't ever believe one thing that those preachers taught or the Sunday school teacher. She said, because the spirits told me they were false. So when she had to live at home till she was 18 because she didn't have any money. But I said, well, as long as you live in this house, you're going to church, whether you believe or not. Well, when she graduated at 18, she decided to move out, of course, so she could do what she wanted. Well, every job she got fired from stealing, the waitresses' tips, all this kind of thing. So finally, she came by to visit, and she said, I want you to know something. She said, I have a new mother. I said, well, good for you. I said, well, I'm happy for you. She said, I heard of this cult. And the lady's name is, Olga. And she said, I looked them up. I said, you looked them up? They didn't look you up? She said, no. She said, I looked them up and I've joined them. And I said, you don't know what you're getting into. Well, she's still in it. I mean, everybody's tried, doctors have tried. When she was still at home, I had to go to the hospital because my nerves got so bad trying to deal with her. And my family doctor finally told me, he'd known all the family all years. He said, Madelyn, what parents do not realize, she just does not have your genes. She has all these other genes in her, and you're killing yourself for nothing. She is who she is, and you just can't change her if she doesn't want to be changed. It's like God gives you a choice. Your daughter has made the choice not to follow God, and you cannot force her, and she's not going to do it, and she never has.
What is her name and when was she born?
Well, her name is Davy Lynn. Her middle name is after my mother, Elmon. And she was born in October the 11th, 1948.
Okay. And your other daughter, can you tell us just what you
She's
wanted?
6 years younger, and she was born June 22nd, 1954.
And her name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie Lynn.
Okay. Is there?
But she's never had a mental problem. She made straight A's all through school. I never had any problems with her. She was enthused to do everything. She wanted to play the organ, the flute, the guitar, and she caught on to everything, which is discouraging. But she didn't take after
Yeah,
him.
very talented.
But you wonder why the genes go into one child and they don't go into another, you know.
Yeah.
And she never deviated from being, well, as herself.
Okay. Can you just tell us very briefly or summarize briefly the second marriage, when and you were married, what
The
age?
second one, okay.
Yeah, just
Yes,
you
it
tell us
sounds
what
like
you
a-
want. and
Sounds
what you
like a
don't want.
soap opera, doesn't it? No, it does. Well, anyway, when I was working in the city of Anaheim and head cashier, the police department was right next door. And you had to go over there to be fingerprinted to work there. Well, he ended up being my second husband. He was head of the whole ID department. And he was one of these people that he was good at faking what he really was, which I didn't find out until our honeymoon, which is real soon. And, you know, and, but he loved being a policeman, but he didn't get along with anyone at work. No one liked him. He was egotistical. He was overbearing. He was a control freak. I mean, when he came home at night, the towels had to be lined up on the toilet. Not the toilet, or the towel rack. And if there was anything left out of place, he just went. And when you, like, to give you an example, we got a brand new car. And we were going to go show it to my mother and my stepfather. And so I had cooked a big breakfast. He loved to eat, and I cooked all the time. So I had this big breakfast. Well, one of the pans I could not get clean. So I got the whole kitchen spotless. He walks in and he said, "If you don't clean that pan, we're not going." I said, "I've done everything I can." It's the first time I really got mad. I said, "Fine, you call my mother and tell her why we're not coming." "Well, no," he says, "I don't want to tell your mother that." I said, "Well, fine, because I'm not cleaning that pan." But everything was that way. He just was a control freak, you know? So anyway, when, we'd been married, let's see,
Yeah.
5 years. And so the man that he worked with up at the jail, he was head of the jail thing, he cooked chili every day. Well, my ex-man loved chili, so he'd go in there and eat chili. Well, the man told him, he said, "We are living out in Elsinore, and we have 40 head of white-faced heifers and 40 chickens. And we're going into a bigger place out there. Would you like to rent it for a while?" Oh, I was ecstatic. I was so happy. Well, he didn't do any of the work, but I loved it. So we had been there maybe, 6 months. But the first night was kind of scary because he couldn't come out. He was busy in Anaheim where we lived. He couldn't drive out to Elsinore. Well, the fog had come up really heavy. You couldn't see anything. Well, the phone would ring, and it was heavy breathing. And I was scared it was my first husband because I couldn't see anything out there. And my daughter and I was there alone. We did have our dog, thank goodness. And so we stayed there about 6 months. And he came in one day and he said, "I'm taking this job in Vietnam." I said, "You are?" He said, "Yes." He said, "The jailer was offered it, but he said he can't take it." And he said, "They want someone that's head of the whole identification thing in Vietnam because there's only 5 last names, so they have to have fingerprints." So he said, "I'm taking the job." I said, "Well, good." So he was gone a year and a half the first time, and he was supposed to put my name in to go overseas in a safe haven. Well, after a year and a half, I never heard anything. So time went on. So I would call him on the ham radio. And he'd say, I can't talk, I'm just too busy. I said, I took 3 days to get through here. So finally, I just slammed the phone down. So I called Washington. And I said, I want to talk to somebody that's head of Safe Haven. And so this lovely black lady came on the phone. It was a miracle. She was the warmest thing. And I said, I'd like to know why I haven't been called to go overseas to a safe haven. So she called later and she said, honey, I hate to tell you, but your husband never put your name in. I was just livid. And so she was one of these that God said, she said, honey, would you like to go in 2 weeks overseas? I said, I would love it. She said, well, I have 2 openings. One's in Philippines, but it's under martial law. You have to live in a hotel and be in at 6 in the afternoon. I said, no, that's not for me. She said, the other is Taiwan. You have your own 2-story house. You can belong to the Officers Club where the food is fabulous. She said, would you like to go? I said, I would love to go. She said, fine. I'll mail you all the tickets, your passport, everything. So she said, but you have to leave in 2 weeks. And I mean, I must kill myself getting ready. I had to put one thing for the shipping, one in storage, and the things that I wanted to sell. And then we just bought a brand new truck when he left with a camper. I mean, it was just beautiful. It had stereo in it. Well, he got bored with it. So I sold it for nothing because I had to do it fast. So I moved to Taiwan in 1970, and I loved it. I absolutely, it opened up a new life for me. Is this too long?
No, he was
okay.
Madeline,
But I think I loved in Taiwan because it was very slow pace. You know, I mean, everything was slow, and you could go in all these open air places and look at all the oil paintings that were stacked, I mean, high, and then you pick the frame. Well, that's where I got all my things from, you know? And my daughter and I had a home that was twice this big by herself. It's a whole new, after living in the motels and stuff, it was a whole new world, you know? And he would come there every 6 months, and it hadn't changed a bit. So then on Thanksgiving, they said that the wives could go into Vietnam, but it was under fire. And you went in on your own. They couldn't do anything if you got captured. I said, well, I've been through everything else, I'll go. So I went for 12 days, and you could hear the things. But the interesting thing was, across where his apartment was the cemetery where when the French occupied Vietnam, and they had the cemetery there. And it was all in French, and that's what the thing was. All they had sentries all in the top with machine guns guarding the city, and it was right across the street. And show you how God watched over me. I thought, I'm going over there and go all through that cemetery. No one was there. I mean, except when I walked in, the guard said, you know, you're on your own. I said, yes, I know that. So I walked in, and as I went way in the back, there was about 8 Vietnamese soldiers playing basketball. And I thought, you know, I wasn't a bit afraid. It's like God put a covering on me, and I just wasn't afraid. The whole time that I was in Vietnam for 12 days, and it was under fire. And my girlfriend came. She was the cutest thing you ever saw, and they were a young couple. Well, her husband was stationed way out in the province where it was dangerous. So the only time she could be with him is to go with him in the Jeep clear out to the province. Well, she did, but as they started out across to go, the Vietnamese started shooting at him in the Jeep. And so, of course, her husband went as fast as he could because they were halfway. And she said she had long, gorgeous blonde hair. She said I couldn't see anything for the hair, so she said I opened my suitcase, got my shower cap on, and she said, "I'm sure the Vietnamese thought, what is that?" You know.
Yeah.
But it was something that God gave me because it gave me the courage when I went there to make the decision I wanted a new life. I was not afraid of anybody anymore. I didn't have my mother to tell me what to do, or my husband, he was in Vietnam. I didn't have my older daughter, she was already on her own. I felt like I'd been born again. I can't explain it. It changed my life. It really did. That was God. I'd have never had the courage to have gone, but my life has been so blessed. God has just opened up things for me that I never dreamed was possible. And then when Don and I got married, it opened up a new life, and we've been married 46 years.
On your other two marriages, how long were you married to the first husband?
Okay, the first husband was 13 years,
And
the second was 10.
Okay. Who or what made the best, impressed you in your life, or made the most,
Input?
or
My mother.
your mother?
She taught me to have integrity. She taught me that if somebody told you something, you never repeated it. And she taught me manners that no matter where I went, I never felt ill at ease. She gave me, I think, a feeling of that I could do things, when I really was a very shy child. And I had no other person to turn to. And if God hadn't done that for me, I don't, like my brother said, I really thank Mother for teaching me all the things that I have been able to use in life that's helped me have a better life, because she just really was a person who had integrity. And to me, that's very important.
Yes. Can you tell us about when you were saved?
Yes. I was 9 years old. I'd always gone to church, and we went to, of course, we were always Baptist. And it was a big church, and we went every Sunday. And they always had altar call, of course, and communion every Sunday. Well, the one Sunday that my mother was sick, she couldn't go, the Sunday school teacher picked me up. And so I went to church, and I went forward for the altar call. When I got home, I said, "Mother," she said, "I've gone with you every Sunday, and I wanted to watch you." I said, "Well, it just moved me." And that's when I did, yeah. And I never stopped going to church or being in choir.
Do you have any spiritual experiences or know of any spiritual experiences that may have happened to you or someone?
I don't tell this to many people, but I'm going to tell this
Oh, lucky us.
because it's so awesome.
Okay.
When we were living on Quail Run.
Which is where?
Pardon?
Which city?
I'm sorry. Los Alamitos,
Okay,
California.
Okay.
And we'd been married a while. And in the bathroom in the back, we had our washer and dryer. And one day I was back there, and there was only one way out at the doorway. All of a sudden, I heard this horrid laughing. I mean, horrid, between me and the door. And I knew who it was. I knew it was Satan. I mean, it was so evil. And I kept praying, pleading the blood. Finally, it disappeared. Well, this friend of mine, she had a ministry of healing. And she said, "You anoint every post in that house." And Donna and I did. Well,
What do you mean by post exactly?
I'm sorry, about the doorway.
door frames?
Yeah, the door frames.
Okay.
So we did. So anyway, I kept feeling this spirit in the house. I don't know how to feel it. It was heavy. It was like
Uneasy?
I never felt anything like it before. and it just got worse and worse. So at that time, I was undergoing TMJ treatments, which was painful. 3 years I went through it, and I was in so much pain. So this friend of mine who was married to a minister, and she had a healing ministry. Well, so one day she called me and she said, I felt led to call you today. I said, it's really a bad day. And I said, it's such a, I'm in so much pain. It's such a heavy spirit in here. And all of a sudden, this is the truth. I looked at the door that went out between the dining room and the kitchen, and I saw an angel there. Now this angel, the Lord impressed me. He said, that is your, warring angel. His name is Hagar. And he was dressed, you've ever seen how the French dress with the collar and the helmet? That's what he was dressed like. And I looked to the left and went into the bedroom, and there was an angel in a white gown. I mean, it was earth-shattering. Now, this is what really is amazing. My friend was on the phone, and she said, Madelyn, you have 2 angels in that room. I mean, it was awesome. She said, I'm going to describe them to you because God is telling me. She described the one in the doorway and the one in the doorway. Nobody could have known that. So when people say, I don't believe in angels, I've seen mine. Now, the guardian angel was named Tonette, Lord tell me. The guardian, the warring angel was Hagar. Every day I thank them for watching over me, keeping me safe, keep me safe through the first marriage and all that threatening stuff, the second marriage, and this marriage. I mean, it's like, so every night I think, God, thank you for sending my angels, bless them for it, and when my life on earth is through, whoever gets them as their angels, make them to realize how blessed they are. But that is the truth. I don't tell many people they don't believe in angels. But when that friend of mine confirmed it,
Yes.
I was just stunned.
Yes.
And she was totally Christian.
What can you describe them more? What they look like?
Pardon?
Can you describe more what they look like? The angels. What did they look? I know you mentioned a little the collar.
He had
what
on
else?
the same outfits. I don't know how to describe the outfits they have in France. But they had the helmet. They had the frilly collar. They had the really dress jacket that had the fuller sleeves, and the pants that went down in short boots. The other angel was totally in a white gown, but I could not tell their faces that much. But they did. I mean, it was there, but I wasn't. It was just like it wasn't happening to me. That I was, I mean, just it was awesome. But there is angels. Billy Graham has a whole book on nothing but angels, and he said in the Bible, angels are mentioned 300 times.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Did they have wings?
I didn't see the wings.
Oh.
I'm not. They had on the gown and the outfit that they had on, but I could tell that the warring angel was a man, that the guardian angel was a woman. That's the only thing I could tell, just from the structure.
What?
Pretty awesome.
Yes, this is switching gears just a little.
What, Uncle
No.
Don? What were you gonna say?
Huh?
What were you gonna say? You sound like you wanted to say something.
Oh, I had a different experience that was unusual to me. When I started going to church, Assembly of God in San Bernardino there when I got home from the war, and I don't know, about a year later, I decided it was about time I was serving the Lord, and So I went forward on one of the altar calls, and I gave my heart to the Lord and started going to church every week. And so the oldsters, a lot of them would pray with any new converts, and they'd say, now you need the baptism of the Holy Spirit, Well, I'd gone to church off and on, and many times with the folks when I was younger, and so I said, yeah, I need to do that. So they not every Sunday night, but most Sunday services, they would maybe, I think, I've forgotten, but probably about 3 out of every 4. If there was somebody to that wanted to pray for their gift of the Spirit, to do so, and so I used to go up whenever they did that. And so one night, I'm praying, Lord, I didn't know how to get the Holy Spirit, and they pray with me and try to get me to speak in tongues. And I don't know how long I prayed, but for a while, and all of a sudden, I feel my chest is like, it's like I had a cavity in, and the Spirit was pouring in this joy and laughter, and I was laughing, loud, and I remember I said, oh no more, Lord, no, I couldn't hold anymore. It filled me with the Spirit so much that I couldn't hold anymore, and all of a sudden I'm looking, and I'm looking down at myself, laughing in the Spirit, and I rose up like it was my body, and I'm looking down, and about, I don't know, from 12 feet, let's say, and I'm looking at myself. And it was a real out-of-body experience, because I could see me laying there on the floor, and laughing. And then pretty soon I went back into my body, and that was it. I finally quit laughing and could handle the pressure of the feeling. So when the Spirit talks about being over the overflowing Spirit, well, it sure was. And many people who have experience with the Lord like that and receive the baptism don't have an out-of-body experience.
No, not at all.
No.
Okay, we're going to switch gears just because we're running out of time. Madelyn, and we're going to ask Madelyn a question or two. What do you think is the most important lesson you've ever learned?
No.
Lesson?
Mm-hmm. Or one of the most important?
I think I learned that sometimes you think someone is your friend, and you learn through life their acquaintances. It's a totally different thing. You don't make friends very often. Most people repeat everything, or they are so judgmental when they don't agree with you. But to me, a dear friend is someone who loves you regardless of your faults. I think that's one of the things I've learned. I learned it the hard way in one time when I went through my second divorce. Our whole group at church ran around together, and I thought they were my friends. I really did. And when I decided to get a divorce, even though they knew why, when I would see them, they would barely speak. And I learned that you're going to meet many people in your life, but you won't have many friends.
Right.
I think that's the greatest lesson I've learned.
How would you describe yourself? What character? Yourself?
I know what you mean, yeah. I think the greatest thing God has given me is that I never doubted who Jesus was. Never. Even when I was 7 years old, I had to go to the hospital and have my tonsils out. And I looked at that big light where they were going to put on you, and I was not afraid. I felt him. I just felt his spirit. And I mean, I really didn't know exactly how it worked, but I never doubted that he was who he was. Now, that's a gift to me.
Yes.
A total gift, because it's hard to accept that without visual seeing things.
Yeah.
You know, it says that in the Bible.
Yeah.
That if you still accept him and you can't see him, that's
Yeah.
where it's all at.
Yeah. It definitely is. Yes. So that's why we're going to go ahead and round it up or wind it up. And we want to thank you for being so honest and so open and telling.
Well, it was nice to be able to have someone like you and John that I felt very comfortable with, and I feel your love. It isn't phony. It
Yeah.
is there.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I just can't believe, I tell the Lord and tell Don every day, I just can't believe that God is so good to me that he sent Linda and John into my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, because my children have never been that warm, that caring, and I'm being honest. But they're that way with everybody. It's just not me. That's their nature. But you can't imagine what it's like to have someone care as much as you all do.
Well, but we love you.
And
So
that
if you
is-
love somebody and you respect somebody, you obviously do caring things for
But
them.
a lot of people aren't giving.
I know.
They're not giving of their time. They're not giving freely of their love. It's like, well, if you do this for me, I'll love you. But y'all aren't that way at all. I'm just awed by it. I've lived 88 years, and I've never had anyone cheerfully the way you and John do things for me. Never.
But you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
And we do it,
And
like
I
I said,
appreciate
because
God
we love and respect.
blessing me, so.
Yes. So.
Okay, that's all I could think of. So I guess we'll wrap it up then. Until the next time.
No, you got enough for the whole world.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for taking all the time to do it, thinking of the questions, for filming it, and for being very patient, because it's hard to answer when you've never seen the
Okay.
questions beforehand.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And John, you know, I want to pay her for the hardware you got, and that, and gasoline to get here.
No, it's okay.
I'm saying no, Madeline's tired. Don't feel like writing a check, but
You catch us next time.
No, I'm writing the check.
We'll catch up on that. Yeah, I
to go to
want
the
you to know that I'm not
Oh.
trying to. skirt away from it,
We're not worried about that.
you know, and
Yes, just the baby.
so anyhow, yeah, we want to make sure that gets cleared correctly.
Yeah.
So